We cannot take for granted how important that team of people really is to our church. I mean, we got people all over this church who won't serve at all, and then we've got that crew of people who's investing hours upon hours every week into teaching, loving, caring, leading, sometimes just managing, and oftentimes teaching the gospel to your children so that you can sit in here and do the exact same thing. And that's why when I think about our kiddos team, I think about people who know what it feels like to be able to say, hey, we got next, and actually mean it. And for those of you who haven't been around long, every year at the end of the year, we ask God for kind of like a vision word or a vision phrase that can set the tone for the year to come, that can be a mantra for us for the year to come. And last year, we felt like our word for this year, for 2023, was the phrase, we got next. And understandably, if you're not a baller, not all of us can be ballers. If you're not a baller, if you're not a sports fan, you maybe have never heard of that phrase before. And so in case you are still a little bit shaky concerning what the phrase we got next even means, I'll give you the rundown real fast. About 6 or 7 years ago, my wife and I were still living in Alabama. And at the time, I was youth pastoring, which means I was playing a lot of pickup basketball with kids all over the city. And no matter where you're at, if you go to a basketball court and you want to play, but there's already a team playing, then what you got to do is you got to pick up the other 2, 3, 4 people that are sitting on the sideline, and you got to create a team with them. And once you've created your team, you then call out loud and you say, hey, we got next. We got next. And when you say that, what you're communicating is that the moment an opportunity presents itself for me and my team to go and to play, we are ready. Our shoes are tied. We're warmed up. We're ready to get off of the sideline and into the action. We're ready to stop watching everybody else have fun, and we're ready to have fun ourselves. And late last year, that's exactly what we invited our church to do. We began a 2-year generosity initiative that was designed to help us fund this massive transformation and renovation that's coming for our kiddos area, and actually a renovation that's about to start in like 45 or so days. And we're calling that giving initiative, and this whole year we've been calling it We Got Next, okay? But I need you to hear me. Even though, of course, that's the name of the giving initiative, being We Got Next people doesn't stop at being someone who's just willing to give a little bit of extra money in the offering every week to develop a dynamic kid space, okay? Being a We Got Next kind of person, it means way more than that. To be someone who embodies the We Got Next mindset is to be someone who, when a challenge of any kind presents itself, you don't shy away from the challenge and just hope that someone else will figure it out and that someone else will come up with a solution for it. No, if you're a We Got Next kind of person, you go, I'm the solution. I'm here. I'm ready to help. I'm up for the challenge. And that's why every time I see our kiddos team and the effort and the work that they put in every week, I know that they know what it means to say we got next and mean it, because they're taking on responsibilities that, if you're being honest, no one else in this room is willing to take on. They're taking on responsibilities like holding your crying children. You remember the first time you dropped your kid off at kiddos? How did it go? For most of you, they weren't like, yes, leave me, Mom and Dad. You know how they were screaming, and someone else had to hold that child and comfort them and love them for the entire hour and a half that they continued crying and screaming. They're holding crying babies. They're changing diapers. And toughest of all, they're doing their best to teach and introduce these kids about the love and presence of God when many of their parents aren't even doing that at home. And then to pile it on, they're having to try and lead and manage those same kids who aren't getting disciplined at home. This is why I'm telling you, when I look at this team, when I look at that team over there and I see what they're doing on days like Kid-Tributor Day, I go, man, they know what it feels like to say we got next and to actually mean it. And I say that because the We Got Next initiative and the We Got Next mindset in general, to be fair, it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with us in this room. And think about it. The whole reason that last year and still to this day, so many people committed to giving above and beyond and to going way over in their efforts of tithing and giving every single month, they did that because when they said, sign me up for that, we got next, they did it because of who's next. That's what all this is about anyways, who's next. And that's why on Kid-Tributor Sunday, the title of the message today is going to be Who's Next? Who's next? That's the question that should be in your mind 24/7. That's the question that should determine how you talk, how you live, how you spend your money, how you spend your time, what your passions are. That question should determine how and why we do church, how we do church. Because who is it that's next? Who is it that's actually next? It's these kids. It's our youth group. It's our college students. It's a generation of kids that are actively leaving the faith altogether, leaving the church altogether. They are the next wave of community leaders. They're the next wave of teachers. They're the next wave of business owners. They're the next wave of pastors, politicians, and parents alike. And you want to know what's so terrifying about that? What's so terrifying is that oftentimes, rather than actually getting to know them, listening to them, investing in them, discipling them, loving them, caring for them, the church finds a way to do the exact opposite on a consistent basis. Instead of any of that, we just like complaining about them on social media. Or we like writing them off altogether. We like doing what we like doing. We like the music that we like. We like church looking like we want church to look. We do what we like and only what we like. And then we have the audacity to wonder why in the world all these kids aren't interested in a God, when in reality, it's because we aren't interested in them. We wonder, man, what in the world, why are they leaving church? Maybe it's because there's been a generation of people behind them, namely us, who aren't investing in them like they deserve. And here's where I'll get a little bit more encouraging, okay? We're not the only generation who's made that mistake. All you got to do is read the book of Judges. When was the last time you spent some time in the book of Judges? When you get to the book of Judges, it comes right after this long period of time where Israel is just kicking butt and taking names. Under the leadership of Joshua, the guy who comes right after Moses, under the leadership of Joshua, they finally crossed their way into the promised land that they've been waiting for. And while they're there, they are picking fights and winning fights with all of the enemy nations. They're doing great. They are forward thinkers. They are concerned about leaving a legacy for the people behind them. They're doing what they're putting in work. They're engaging in all these wars. And then you get to the book of Judges, and you start to notice something interesting happening. Little by little, each of the tribes ceases to be so mission-minded, and they cease to be focused, and they cease to do what they do in order to build a legacy for the people coming behind them, and they start slowing down, and they start living their lives just for them. And I want you to see what happens. Okay, let's read it real quick. Judges 1:28. Judges 1:28 says this. It says, when Israel grew strong. Now, this is talking about all of Israel, not a specific tribe, but all of Israel. When they grew strong, when they finally inherited everything that they've been waiting for, when they started experiencing a little bit of peace and a little bit of success and a little bit of blessing, when things really start going good for them, when Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they didn't drive them out completely. This is an issue because God is very clear. They are to drive out these people from the land completely. But it says, when they got a little bit stronger, when things finally started going their way, they decided we're not going to drive them out completely. We're just going to make them our slaves. We're going to keep them around for a little bit, and it continues going. And we're giving some examples concerning different tribes and how they continue to do this. Judges 1:30. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron or the inhabitants of Nahalal. So the Canaanites lived among them. But hey, they made them subject to forced labor. They made them their slaves. Judges 1:33. Naphtali also, another tribe there. Naphtali also didn't drive out the inhabitants around them, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh or the inhabitants of Beth Anath. So they lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and of Beth Anath became subject to forced labor for them. Judges 1:35. The Amorites persisted in dwelling in Mount Heres, in Ajalon, and in Shalbim, but the hand of the house of Joseph, who should have gotten the Amorites out of there completely, it says they just rested heavily on them, and again, they made them become subject to forced labor. So let me break down what's happening here, okay? As soon as Israel ceased to be mission-minded, as soon as they stopped moving forward, as soon as they quit doing what God had told them to do, as soon as they started living their lives solely for them, and they lost track of the generation that was coming behind them, instead of continuing to obey God and drive out all these enemy nations, they decided, it wouldn't be that big of a deal just to keep them around. I mean, we'll make them slaves, but war is tough. War requires work. It requires effort. It requires commitment. And things are going good for us right now. We don't really need to do that. So let's just keep them around. Well, unfortunately, God does not share that same idea. God does not think that that's a good idea, and he's very clear with them with this. Look at it real quick. Judges 2, 1 through 3. We're just rolling right on through. It says this. After all this is happening, the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt, and I brought you into this land that I swore to give your fathers. And I said, hey, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You should break down their altars. Yes, I did all that, and yet you haven't obeyed my voice. What is this that you've done? So now I say, I'm not going to drive them out before you. I'm not going to do what I told you to do, because that's not how it works. If God tells us to do something and we don't do it, he doesn't come behind us and take care of our responsibility. He says, I'm not going to drive them out before you, but instead now they're going to become thorns in your side, and their gods are going to be a snare to you. Or in other words, God's saying, man, y'all just experienced a small taste of my blessing. Just a little bit of peace, just a little bit of success, just a little bit of blessing. And apparently now it's caused you to become complacent altogether. You've stopped moving forward. You're living solely for yourselves. And even worse, you've become comfortable with sin in your life. And he says, now, because of that, just so you know, you're going to suffer the consequences of that moving forward. I'm not going to get you out of this situation. You sowed the seeds. You're going to reap from these seeds. And here's the thing. There's not a person in this room who hasn't experienced this on some level in your own life. Let me give you some examples. Because you refused to drive out that anger and that bitterness that has set up shop in your mind, because you refused to drive it out like God has already asked us to through forgiveness, now that anger and that bitterness, it's starting to negatively affect every part of your life. It's hurting your relationship with your kids. It's hurting your relationship with your spouse. It's hurting your friendships. It's hurting your work. It's hurting your relationship with God. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's because you didn't allow God to begin dealing with that greedy streak on the inside of you through being generous. When he prompted you to be generous, now it's like no matter how much money you get, you still feel like you never have enough. You ever been there? It's like you get the raise, you get the job you're looking for, and it still feels like, I could use more. I'm not satisfied. It's like I could use an extra $10,000, or maybe you just find yourself living as a slave to the dollar. You're missing out on moments with your family. You're missing out on moments with God. You're up late. You're out late. You're up early, and you're trying to get a bunch of money that you're not even going to be able to take with you when you die anyways. Or maybe because you refuse to deal with that addiction to pornography, or because you never dealt with that sexual sin before you got married, you never drove it out of your life like God asked you to. Now you're married, and suddenly you're suffering the consequences of disobeying God. Now, I can't name every example. Maybe it's a gossip issue, or an alcohol issue, or bad eating habits, or a poor self-image of yourself whenever you look in the mirror. But here's the thing. The enemy nations, or in other words, the sins that we allow to live with us rather than driving them out like God's asked us to, here's the issue. When we don't do that, they always come back to haunt us. When we allow things to stay in our lives that God said, man, that needs to go, in the long run, it always comes back to haunt us. And this is why, as a Christian, you've got to make sure that you are always saying yes to God, that you're always growing, that you're always allowing God to challenge you and to push you out of your comfort zone and to begin challenging your preferences. That's why you got to make sure that you're consistently growing in your faith, growing in your understanding of the Word, growing in your prayer life, growing in holiness. Because the second you decide, is good enough. Good enough. Man, talk about a toxic word. That's good enough. The second you decide, man, I'm 45, I grew up in church, I'm good, it's time for this young generation to do their thing, I'm good enough, this is where I'm going to stop. The second you get there in your walk with God is the second you start becoming comfortable with the presence of sin in your life. And here's the problem. When you become comfortable with the presence of sin, the worst part about it is that you're not the only one who has to suffer the consequences for that mistake. When you become comfortable with the presence of sin in your life, there are people watching you and a generation behind you that ends up having to pay the price for your selfishness. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Judges 2:10. This has got to be one of the most disheartening verses in the whole Bible. And that generation, the generation that was fine with the Canaanites and their enemies and the people that obviously represent sin, staying around them, and they put them to forced labor. That generation were gathered to their fathers, meaning that they all died out. And there arose another generation after them who didn't know the Lord at all, who didn't even know the work that God had done for Israel, all that God had done, delivering them from Egypt, walking them through the promised land. A generation showed up who didn't know God, who didn't know anything that God had done. So one generation becomes so self-centered and so focused on doing what they want to do and on living how they want to live that the generation before them grows up and doesn't know God at all. Man, and this isn't just a story of this generation. This is the book of Judges summarized for you. This is the same story that plays out every single time. In fact, I would say if you want an encouraging book of the Bible to read, don't pick Judges. It's not encouraging. Maybe Gideon, right? This guy who doesn't have any faith, questions God constantly, and God still uses him. I'm like, right there, me too. Like, love Gideon. The rest of the book of Judges, it's not an interesting or happy read because this is the same thing that continues happening over and over. Sometimes a group of people really invest into the next generation, to the generation that's coming behind them. Man, they teach them how to love God and serve God and obey God. They have hard conversations. They hold people accountable. Parents are present in the household. And when that's happening, Israel's crushing it. They're killing it. Things are going great for them. And then every time, inevitably, another generation rises up and they stop doing that. Their lives become all about them. The worshiping and obeying God ceases to become a priority. Men and women alike become infatuated with sexual sin. The people of God stop looking like the people of God and start looking like the rest of the world and the cultures around them. And as a result, the generation who has to sit there and grow up and watch it all take place, they end up being even worse than their parents. And like clockwork, every time, they end up right back in slavery. They end up far from God and back in slavery until God raises up some kind of leader. And for a couple of years, they end up doing good again. And then the cycle just repeats itself. And here's the thing. That's not just a story of Israel. It's not just a story of the book of Judges. This is the story of humanity. When one generation makes everything all about them, when one generation refuses to even think about who's next, the following generations pay the price for their kind of selfishness. Morals start to slowly decay. The poor and the orphaned and the elderly stop being cared for. Sexual revolutions take place. The family unit collapses, and then entire nations start to collapse. This happened with Israel over and over. This happened with the Roman Empire, and we are currently watching this happen to the United States of America as we speak. And you want to know what's so ironic about that? One of the main reasons that Jesus showed up was to ensure that stopped happening. God didn't want that to happen. He doesn't want that to happen. But I want to read you God's solution for how that's not going to happen anymore. Check it out. Malachi 4:6. It says, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. One of the very reasons that God sent Jesus was to ensure that our futures are not destroyed, right? To ensure that the land doesn't come under utter destruction via the means of ushering in an era marked by an older generation learning how to lovingly invest into the generation coming behind them, marked by an era marked by the hearts of the fathers turning toward the children. And a lot of times in the Bible, It'll use words like men or man, and certain translations of the Bible will replace it for the word person. It doesn't happen here. This isn't just the heart of the parents toward the children. It's very specific that God includes this word father, that it's marked by the hearts of fathers turning toward the children. In fact, I'll tell you, even in kiddos right now, if you ask anybody in here, raise your hand if you work in kiddos, if you're part of our kiddos team. Okay, yes, anybody that raised their hand right now to tell you, they would all agree with this statement. I've talked to all of them. There is just something different between anyone else leading a classroom and a confident older male leading a classroom. When a confident older male is in the classroom, there is a type of respect that children give them that they don't even have to be taught to give them. They just give them that kind of respect, and that's because there's something uniquely special about the roles of mothers and fathers when it comes to raising up a generation, when it comes to raising kids. It's why we need moms and dads in households, because there's something special about moms, but there's also something uniquely special about dads. I mean, I can tell you that is why I am who I am. It's because I have strong male role models and parents and presence in my life, okay? I do. It's interesting. My stepdad and my dad were both really actively involved in my spiritual development. Now, I say spiritual development because I think a lot of times dads can be involved in your sports teams, right? Where do we do that? Dads are like, Mom, you teach him the Bible, you teach him how to pray, I'll teach him how to throw a football. That's fine, okay? Teach him how to throw a football. And when I say both my dads were involved in my athletics, I mean when I was a kid, my dad and my stepdad coached my baseball team together. You ain't ready for that, all right? You ain't ready for the conversations. First day of practice, when the parent goes to my stepdad and said, who's your son? And he says, Alex. And then they go to my dad and they say, who's your son? He says, Alex, with no extra explanation. In South Fulton, Tennessee, people are like, what's going on here? And then, then they figure it out. Yeah, some of you, it took you a second. You were like, why is that weird, right? You got there. Why would anyone be confused about that? Now, they were invested in my athletics, but I also had two dads that were highly invested in my spiritual life. From the time I was in elementary, just a show of hands, how many of you grew up in like a Baptist church at any time? Probably most of the people. You guys remember RAs and GAs, Royal Ambassadors? It's Christian Boy Scouts. That's all. That's what it is. And you do it on like Wednesday nights. Both my dad and my stepdad were actively involved during my elementary years whenever I was in RAs. When I got into middle school, we started going to different churches. My mom and stepdad went to one church. My dad and stepmom went to another church. But at my stepdad's church, he was actively involved in the middle school ministry by being a Sunday school teacher multiple times for middle schoolers. At my dad's church, he was teaching Sunday school for middle schoolers, so I had them both. I get in high school, my parents all start going to the same church. I'm talking mom, stepdad, dad, stepmom. At the time, my dad is the youth pastor at my church, and my stepdad starts serving in the youth group under the leadership of my dad. The week I graduate high school, my stepdad becomes the college pastor at that same church. I then go to the Ramp School of Ministry, spend a couple of years in Hamilton, become a youth pastor, and guess what happens during that time? My stepdad plants a church, and when we move back, he then hires me on to be the youth pastor at his church that he's pastoring. Meanwhile, I'm working with my dad, who's also pastoring me. Okay? You can't make this stuff up. There's just something to this. There's something to this. And that's not to downplay the role that both my mother and stepmother played in my spiritual development. Okay, whenever I was in nursery, guess who was there? Mom and stepmom. Whenever I was in kids ministry, mom and stepmom. They played a huge role in the middle school ministry, the youth ministry, the college ministry. They both invested in the lives of me, my siblings, and all of my friends. But here's the thing. We just kind of expect that. We expect women to care about kids. We expect women to invest in the spiritual lives. We expect them to be the ones who pray with the kids and teach them how to do all that different stuff. So it wouldn't surprise you to hear that they were involved in all that stuff. But please, hear me, men of God. Raising, loving, and discipling the next generation of kids is not solely a job reserved for women. They just tend to be the only group of people who are actually willing to do it. And I think that's pathetic. That we've got Christian, Jesus-loving men all over the church, all over the global body of Christ who love Jesus and love coming to church on Sunday mornings, but I find it concerning that those same men aren't willing to help in kids ministry on Sunday mornings. I find it concerning, but I don't find it surprising. Let's just call it what it is. We love complaining about the state of our nation and how it's just going to hell. And we love talking about how much we need revival. But you know what we don't like doing? Putting in the work that revival requires. Don't like that? I mean, I suppose if revival just meant more church services and voting a Republican into office, then by all means, God send revival. Maranatha, come Lord Jesus. But if revival requires the hearts of the fathers turning toward the children's via the mean of working in kids ministry on Sunday morning, you can keep revival. We don't want none of that, because you know what that would mean? It would mean that men would have to be committed. It would mean that men would have to work. They'd have to put a little bit of effort into this. You know what else it would mean? It would mean that my Sundays don't get to be all about me anymore. I'm not about that life. But I'll say this confidently. Give me 20 good men. 20 men who will give a whopping hour and a half of their week 2 times a month. 20 men who aren't concerned about a spotlight, who aren't concerned about people clapping for everything that they do. 20 men who aren't concerned about everyone telling them how great they are. 20 guys who just say, I love the next generation. I care about who's next. I'm willing to invest in them. Give me 20 guys like that. We'll flip this area upside down, man. I put money on that. 30 years from now, you give me 20 guys that are doing that in kiddos every 30 years from now, this church in this area will be thriving. 20 guys, let me tell you some guys that I'm talking about. I wrote some of their names down so I didn't forget them. Specifically, I'm talking about guys like Drew Porter, Josh Box, Greg Palmer, Hunter Adams, David Miles, Justin Miller. Fathers whose hearts are turned toward children in kiddos every single week. Give me 15 more guys just like them who don't just talk about loving the next generation, but who actually go and do it. Who are willing to learn lessons and teach kids and discipline them and be in there and love them and father them and go to their soccer games. Give me 15 guys like that. Game over. Game over. We have not seen God do anything compared to what would happen if we had men that were interested in raising kids. And I say that because that's not even taking into consideration the women in this room that are being challenged by the Holy Spirit to do that same thing. That's not even taking into consideration all the women in our church who've been doing that for years, absolutely crushing it, and not asking for a thank you at any point. Women, like, let me just list some of them off too. I can't list them all because there's way too many to list in one sermon. Aubrey Doyle, Bridget Butler, Tiffany Palmer, Crystal Severance, Billie Jean Perry, Liz Price, far too many others for me to list. Women of God who, when they say they care about who's next, actually put the time and effort and work into caring for who's next. Today, I would like to challenge and invite some of you to join the ranks of people like that. I want to invite some of you to actually embody a who's next attitude, to embody the mission and the vision that Jesus says follows people who trust in him and who love him. And I know that is like a kind of a vague thing at the moment. And so let me take the next few minutes and I want to give you 4 practical ways that you can be someone who lives a who's next lifestyle. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. On October 29th, we're hosting Vision Sunday. This, for those of you who are relatively new to our church or who have never been to a church like this before, Vision Sunday is something that we do every year where we set aside an entire Sunday to talk through, remember, and celebrate all that God's done in our church and within our lives in the previous year, but also talking through and celebrating and casting a little bit of vision for where we believe God's taking us in the year to come, all right? If you are a member of the Overflow church family, if you consider yourself to be a member of the Overflow church family, I need you to be here on Vision Sunday on October 29th. That's not the day to eat pancakes and watch online from home. You ain't watching. I know. I've tried. I did it. I went through COVID too, and I was the one preaching. I was watching myself, and I wasn't engaged. So, I know how hard it is, all right? That is not the day to stay at home and try to do church at home. I need you to be here. Be present on that day. That's one practical way that you can embody who's next, because that day is all about who's next. It's going to be a lot about our kids and what we have in line and what we have in store for them in the future. So if you're writing it down, October 29th, Vision Sunday. Number 2, on October 21st, we're hosting an I Love My Church Day. I Love My Church Day. Now, this is different than what we've normally done. Typically, we do things called Serve My City Days. And Serve My City Days are like hosting little miniature mission trips right here in the city. You don't have to pay $6,000 to go overseas and meet people that you're never going to see again and take pictures with them. You actually get to meet people in your own community and help them and help businesses and help organizations that are doing cool stuff. And we normally do that, but knowing that a giant renovation is about to make the kiddos area unusable for a period of months, we now have to figure out a solution. We got to figure out somewhere for our kids to go, and we have some ideas. We have some solutions. We'll fill you guys in on some of those in the weeks to come. But if they're going to work, we need as much help as we can to make it happen. We need people who can clean, people who can mop, people who can paint, people who can do carpentry work and engage in a little bit of manual labor. And so if you're ready to be someone who says, hey, who's next? I will embody the who's next attitude. Go to the Overflow Church app. Sign up for I Love My Church Day. We'll give you even more information on that to come. That's the second thing you can do. Number 3, now this one's going to be funny. Some of y'all aren't ready for this. Number 3, I am inviting and challenging some of you to begin going to the 8 a.m. worship experience, okay? To commit to going. Now, let me be up clear, okay? This probably is not geared to people who live 50 minutes away. We got a ton of people at our church who drive 45, 50 minutes, an hour. We have one couple that drives 2 hours and 10 minutes every time that they are here just to serve and be here at church, okay? So that's happening. I'm probably not talking to y'all, all right? That's really early. You're going to have to get up at like 4 a.m. to make that happen. That's not it. We want to invite some of you to start coming to the 8 a.m., and there's 2 reasons for that. 2 reasons, okay? They're both practical, but here's reason number 1. Reason number 1 is the 9:45, the one that you're at right now. This is the worship experience that almost every first-time guest that we're ever going to see is going to come to, because it is at a more normal time. 11:30 isn't a super normal time to go to church. Lord knows 8 a.m. is not a normal time to go to church. The 9:45 is, though, and so we see a lot of first-time guests, but here's the issue. And it's a good issue, but it is an issue. We run out of seats in here all the time. And while that's a good issue, you know what else it does? It makes visiting really intimidating for a first-time guest. When you can't find 3 seats in a row to sit anywhere in the church service, it kind of makes you eerie about going to the church service, because it's like, I kind of wanted to sit with my wife today, and now we're not going to be able to do that. And a surefire solution to making sure that first-time guests and new people have somewhere to sit is by some of us who live close, some of us who've been going to this church for 3-4 years, consider ourselves leaders and contributors around here, committing to the 8 a.m. service, okay? The second reason, and it's another very practical reason why I am inviting and challenging some of you to do this, is because at the 8 a.m., when we're talking about kiddos, we might have 20 or 25 kids in there. That's a doable number for any number of volunteers to take care of. You got 5 volunteers in there, you can take care of 25 children, no problem at all. During the 9:45, we have like 115 kids back there in a space that is like half the size of this room, maybe less than half the size of this room. Like it is an incredibly tiny space back there for 115 kids, and we want to be able to serve those kids with excellence. We want to be able to invest in their lives and help teach them, and that becomes really, really tough when there's that many kids, and a surefire solution would be if 6 or 7 families who say had children that are already up at 8 a.m., mind you. Your kids are up. You're not up, but they're like, give me a donut, give me whatever, and you're like having to get up. If y'all could commit to coming to the 8 a.m., to sitting, to worshiping during the 8 a.m. and serving at the 9:45, that would help a lot with kiddos. And so, for those of you that are willing to do that, for those of you that would be willing to say, oh man, hey Luke, go grab that paper real quick, over there on the end. Go grab it. The far left, bring it to me. Is that the 8 a.m. one? Is that what it says? Okay, let me see. This paper sitting right over here. For those of you that would be willing to say, count me in for 8 a.m., isn't that a nice slogan, right? That's your slogan today. It was either going to be count me in for 8 a.m. or make 8 a.m. great again. And I was like, we're going with count me in for 8 a.m. So for those of you that would be willing to say, count me in for 8 a.m., we have some papers sitting on these tables right over here on the side. Meet me down front. Sign them. When you're signing this, you're not signing your name in blood, okay? Ain't no one going to walk up to you with this paper 4 weeks from now when you have to go to a 9:45 and be like, what's this? You liar? No one's going to do that. No one's going to do that. I just find that sometimes when you write your name down, it makes it more real to you. When you commit to doing something and you're willing to put your name, your stamp of approval beside it, it makes it more real. And so we're inviting those of you that would like to serve people within this church through attending the 8 a.m. worship experience to come and sign up at the table. And then the final response for those of you who are willing to live a who's next lifestyle is this. Number 4, you could join the kiddos team. You could join the kiddos team. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I won't say this kind of stuff all the time. Our kiddos team is struggling right now. And it is not because they're not great at what they do. We have rock stars on that team. Our kiddos team is not struggling because your kids are so bad. They're not struggling because their team isn't growing. Their team is growing, but the number of children that we have at this church every Sunday is growing faster than that team is growing. And so if we want to continue to serve and love and reach these kids and do it in a way that's meaningful, we're going to have people that serve on this team, that are willing to serve on this team. In fact, it's becoming the problem, and I say problem because it's a great problem. If kiddos is growing, that means that we're reaching families with children. So it's like not a problem. The issue is not having people who are willing to work with kids. That is a problem. Okay, that's the opposite of everything that Jesus came to do. And this problem is becoming so apparent right now that even our children are starting to notice it. They notice a difference between the 8 a.m. and the 9:45, so much so that a month ago, let me tell you this, a month ago, I had no idea I was preaching this message. I did not know I was preaching this message until 9 days ago. A month ago, I thought we were still going to be in You Asked For It, and we are next week. We're going to be back in You Asked For It for 2 more weeks because I wasn't done with it, even though I thought I was done with it. But a month ago, I had no idea I was going to be in this message, and Piper Porter, Bethany, raise your hand. This is Bethany, our small groups pastor right over here. Piper, Drew, are you in the room? Drew, he's right over here. Yeah. Piper grabs Bethany's phone, and she's like, let me make a video real quick. She makes this video. She sends it. She's like, can we send this to Alex and Sam? I don't know if she asked to do that. Bethany sent it to us either way. When I saw the video, I was like, man, that is so prophetic. And so I wanted you guys to see what even our kiddos are noticing right now. So if you guys would, direct your attention to the screen.
At Overflow Church, we're welcoming so many more kids. We're going to need a few more people at Cubs and all that because we're welcoming new babies, and this is going to be a baby funful church. Now,
the babies that we're welcoming.
We're welcoming Arrow, Miss Aubrey's baby,
What was his name?
Roman, which is going to be Sam's baby. We are going to be welcoming probably a few more without this few months. I bet more people are going to get pregnant. So we're going to have to get more people to help out in our toddlers, babies, and tadpoles. Now, this is all I have to say.
Hey, would you guys thank Piper for the video? Now, that was totally unprompted. No one asked for that video. No one was like, hey, Bethany, have Piper send something really cute talking about how there's too many kids and kiddos and we don't have enough help. Why would we do that? That'd be such a strange request. Totally unprompted. And this is my thing. When the kids start to notice it, that's when it's an issue. When your kids look at you and go, the house is dirty, you're like, it's really dirty right now because kids are dirty. And when they notice something's gross, it's like, nah, it's gross. We probably need to sweep the floor or something like that. And so in my mind, I'm going, man, if our own kiddos are noticing it, then this is a problem. But the solution is so simple. You know what the solution is? We need the hearts of the fathers to turn toward the children. We need people who don't just talk about loving the next generation, but are actually committed to raising the next generation. We need people who are willing to give a whole hour and a half of their week, 2 times a month, to loving, teaching, taking care of, and investing into the children coming behind them. And hear me when I say this, hear me clearly. We don't discriminate around here. We take young people, old people, single people, married people. We take women, we take men. Now up front, you are going to have to pass a background check. So if you can't do that, you can't work with kiddos, okay? So just know that. But let me tell you who we are specifically looking for. We're looking for people who are reliable, meaning when you say you're going to be there, you don't back out on Saturday night just because you want to stay at the lake on an extra day. We're looking for people who actually care about what's happening. We're looking for people who are going to show up on time. You know what we're looking for? This is what we need more than anything. We need people who will set their personal preferences aside, and when they serve in kiddos, are willing to serve in whatever role is needed. All right, we got a lot of people that will say, oh, I'll serve in kiddos, but I only want to hold babies. We have plenty of people who can hold babies. We don't have plenty of people who are willing to teach kids lessons and who are willing to be in there and change diapers and do check-in. We need people who are willing to say, yo, we got next because of who's next. And we got next means if there's a challenge, I'm not shying away from it. I will do whatever it takes to meet this challenge head on. And specifically, we are asking God, we are looking for college students, parents, grandparents, men, women. If we had 25 people that signed up for kiddos today, it would change the dynamic of our entire church. If 15 of those people were men, it would change the dynamic of this entire region. If we had 25 people, 25 of you that aren't serving on a team, or maybe you're serving on a team, but you're not serving a lot, or you don't even like it, that would be willing to say, yo, I will go do this. 25 people would change the dynamic of our whole church. 15 of you, if 15 men decided to do it, 30 years from now, this church in this region will be thriving because of your yes. And so in the same way that we have little sign-up sheets for the 8 a.m., if you're in here and you feel like, man, I'm ready to do this, I'm ready to invest into who's next, then I want to invite you to sign up for our kiddos team this morning. I'm asking anyone and everyone who's willing to say yes to 2 times a month. We need your help. We need your help. And hear me, I know the last 2 messages have been the most practical and unique messages that you've probably ever heard me preach, and I'm not apologizing for that. This is our next step as a church. We got to stop asking God to bring people and save people if we're not even willing to help raise them. We're not even willing to help disciple them. Maybe we should stop inviting people to come to church here if we're not even willing to go help take care of their kids. We can't handle 200 more people coming to church here. Because within that 200, 50 of them are going to be kids. 50 more kids with the amount of volunteers we have right now, it sinks the ship completely. All right? So if we really want to pursue our full potential as a church, if we really want to be the kind of people who are mission-minded like Jesus has in mind, then I'm asking for some of you today to sign up for kiddos, to sign up right now and say, well, we got next because of who's next. And I understand that for different people across the room, the response is going to look different. Today, for some of you, you just got one response. For some of you, you may have 2 or 3 or all 4 of them. For some of you, your response is committing to being here on Vision Sunday. For others of you, your response is signing up for the I Love My Church Day. For others of you, the response is saying, I'll go to 8 a.m. If that's how I can help, if I live close, my kids are up at that time, I'll go to 8 a.m., no big deal. And for others of you in here, and what we're praying for is for 25 of you in here, the response is, you know what? Sign me up for kiddos. We got next because of who's next. And know that the responses don't stop after that, man. For some of you, you got to consider the fact that if you really want to leave a legacy for the generation coming behind you, it's going to mean you surrendering your life to Jesus right now. You're in here right now and you need to make a fresh start with God. You need to say yes to the call of God on your life. Yeah, you don't get to invest in the generation behind you if you haven't done that yet. So if you need to do that, I'm not leading you in a prayer. You can do it right here. You can do it in your car on your way home. When you get home, you can stay here later. You know what that looks like? It does not look like you repeating some prayer perfectly after me. You don't have to say the magic words to get into heaven. You know what it looks like to be saved? It looks like you saying, I believe that Jesus is the sinless Son of God who rose from the grave. And because of that, I'm giving him everything. I'm surrendering every part of me over to him, no matter what that looks like. And then you just keep saying yes to God. from there. That's what it looks like for you to be saved. It's not some out-of-body experience where you wind up in the third heaven and something crazy happens to you. It's just you saying yes to the love and mercy of God towards your life, repenting of your sins, and then continuing to say yes every single day. So yeah, for some of you, that's the response. And what I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity to just ask the Holy Spirit, what is my response to today's message? So do me a favor, stand up on your feet. Stand up all over the room. I'll let you out pretty early today. If you would, just with hands out in front of you like this, just with hands out in front of you like this, I want to invite you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. I'm going to pray. When I'm praying, I want you to begin listening to the Holy Spirit and even asking God in your own way, whether it's in your head or out loud, Lord, what is my yes? What are you asking from me? Lord, as a church, we do say yes to whatever's next. As the pastor, the leader of this church, I say yes to what's next. What is it that you'd have from me? I pray that you'd speak to me, challenge me, push me out of my comfort zone. Lord, whatever it looks like, I say yes. We ask that you'd give us ears to hear what you're saying to us this morning. Lord, if it's getting saved, if it's getting baptized, if it's setting the tone for our families, or if it's something as practical as going to Vision Sunday or helping out with I Love My Church Day or attending 8 a.m. or serving in kiddos, challenge us. Challenge us. What is it that you want from me? We say yes to that. And God, I specifically pray for the men in this room who aren't actively serving on a team or aren't really involved in a team, but they know that their next step is getting involved. I pray that you'd raise up men of God who care about the people coming behind them, who care about who's next. We pray that you would change our region 20, 30 years from now because of the men that say yes today. We thank you that you're good for that. We thank you for your faithfulness. And whatever it is that you're asking of us, we say yes. In Jesus' name, everybody said.